Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to our live webinar for the new update of Care Control, which is coming out to all of our customers on the 10th of July, which is next Wednesday. We do these webinars occasionally because it's a good way of communicating out some of the larger releases. We record them and they will be available to watch again for our YouTube channel. We'll send out the release note, which is currently just over 70 pages for this update, so it's quite a big one, and there's lots of stuff that we need to go through, hence why we're doing a webinar today. The format of the webinar will be that we will go through basically the release note, which is going to be sent out to everybody on Friday. So I'll go through that with you guys. Obviously, there's an opportunity to ask some questions as we go forward, and I no doubt there will be further communication later on during this week. Okay, so if we go straight into Care Control Windows, and I will just go through some of the changes that have taken place as part of this release. Okay, the first major change is around the staff module. If I go into add, edit staff records, you'll see we've got some additional tabs on this screen now, and this is one of the major changes that we've done as part of the July release. We've included now a new tab called Roles. Now, Roles is replacing the linked record tab that we used to have previously. Now, if you guys, I know our existing customers will know this, the previous system you could have up to 2 staff members linked together, and that was to support staff who did multiple jobs. However, we have some customers who've got staff who need to do more than 2 jobs, and we also have some other settings that are related to the role of somebody in a care home or care organization. So we've created this new structure called Roles, and you can have as many roles as you want for a staff member. So in this example, the staff member is called Lorna Atlas, and she has multiple roles. She has 2 roles, a primary role, care manager, another one of cover. Now, to add a role, it's really simple. You click the add role option, and this is where you have a screen that allows you to create a new role for a staff member. A role has a category. Now, if you remember, category is the highest level of categorization for a particular role, and in this system we have 6 categories. You can also select a role from the list, or you can type a role name in there. If you were to, in this example, if you wanted to make this role so it's the primary role, if you tick this box here, that will then convert this role when you save it into the primary role, and the existing primary role, this role here, will become a secondary role. You can enter the start date of the role, so when do they start this new job? And then really importantly, we have these new settings around contracts and holidays. So the contract settings, this is where you initially populate what the initial contract is for this role. You've got 2 options. Either it's a 0 hours contract, so you will tick this box here, or it will be a set number of hours per week, which you will then enter in this field here, and that can be obviously a fractional number of hours per week. The population method, this is a really important setting. It defaults to manual population, but you can also have it so it's set to by process template, and this is related to how we used to deal with contracts in the previous incarnation of Care Control. If you're aware that the previous version we used to work on holidays based on the rotated hours for staff members. And we've got to support our existing customers who are using that system. So if you were to choose by process template, that means that the contract would automatically be updated as the rota changes. So it's an option that you can have, so you don't have to worry about updating the contract. If your contracts for staff members are based around a fixed rota and you change that rota for a staff member, then their contract will automatically be changed based on the date that that rota becomes live. And we'll talk about rotas and how those change a bit later. However, most of you are using manual population, which basically means you have to maintain any differences in the contract as time goes forward. Okay. The other two settings that are related to a role is how the holiday allowance is calculated. So the holiday allowance is how many hours of holiday does this particular role accrue. And the first setting is what's called the calculation method. This is basically the method that the system will use to calculate hours for this role. And there are two options here. One is based on contracted hours, and the other one is based on accrued as worked. If you choose contracted hours, then the system will use whatever the initial contract hours are, and as the contract changes, to calculate the holiday allowance for this particular role. If you choose accrued as worked, then as hours are worked on the new roster system, which we'll look at in a minute, then holiday is added into their allowance pot. So there's your two options, again defaulted to contracted hours. Interestingly, if you have 0 hours and you have calculation method of contracted hours, that means that on this particular role there will be no holiday allowance calculated. Okay, which can be valid if you're dealing with holiday allowances in a separate way, possibly using an uplift in payment on their contract, etc. The final setting, which is related to holidays, is called cover hours treatment. So we have in our organizations, we have staff who are on contracts, but they may work more hours than their contracted hours. And this setting is really about, well, what do you want to do about that in terms of holiday calculation, etc. And the two options are no holiday accrued and holiday accrued. Okay. Now the way the system calculates cover hours, obviously we have a situation where somebody may be on, say, a 30 hours a week contract, but with our shift patterns in care homes, they may work one week, they may work 36 hours, another week they may work 24 hours. So the way that the cover hours treatment works is we look at it across the holiday year and we work out whether over the year their working hours are over what the average contracted working hours should be. What this means is as time goes forward in the holiday year, okay, the cover hours treatment will adjust automatically to work out whether any additional allowance needs to be added onto the holiday allowance settings. However, the default is no holiday is accrued, so we're not dealing with that for this particular role. Now, if I look at the role for this particular person, this Lorna, if I go and look at her current primary role, so we're going to go and actually look, and we can edit some of these settings here. You'll see we can do some changes to the rota and ordering, which we'll talk about a bit later. We've got the same calculation method ones we looked at when we were adding a role, but on the right hand side you can see the different contracted hours and how those can change over time. Now you'll notice in this example they're all 32 hours a week. That's because this record originates from the old system where the hours are being populated based on the templated hours, okay? But if you wanted to change the hours, you just simply click edit contract, and here you can go and change the number of hours that you want for a particular period of time. So in this example you could say from the 7th of July going forward, they're actually going to be on 28 hours a week. Now, what's really important is that these dates must be connected. Okay, so you'll see here it flows from the 11th to the 12th, the 25th, 26th, etc. What you can't do is say put in a gap of the 8th of July, and then you go and try and save that information, and it's going to come up with a message to tell you that actually you can't do that because there is a conflict that the start and end dates aren't sequential. Okay, so you've got to have sequential start and end dates. Even if you were going to put in, say, they went into a 0 hours contract for a period of time, you can do that, but they must be sequential hours for that week. Okay, so the next tab along is holidays, and this is really where all this kind of changes to roles and contracts all kind of feed into. So holidays are at a staff level, and we have an allowance at staff level, but the holiday allowance is made up of roles and contracts which are associated with those roles. Hope that all can make sense. So we're kind of adding up all the different role totals to give us an overall score for a holiday. In this example here, this lady called Lorna Atlas, you can see that the holiday calculation based on those 32 hours a week currently is 179.69 hours, but that is made up of 160, sorry, that's the calculation, but in this example she's actually got a negative carryover, so she took more hours the previous year, that's been carried over, and that gives her an allowance for this year of 169.69 hours. The carryover field up here, you can adjust that by simply clicking on the adjust carryover, and you can enter in here what the adjustment is, and that is always added on to the carryover. So you're not replacing that field, you're adding on. So if I wanted to reduce it if I wanted to change it to -5, I would need to add 5 hours onto it with a reason, and that then is all audited and logged in terms of who's made the change and why, etc. You'll see down the bottom here we have in the red box how much remaining holiday they've got. In this example here I haven't got anybody. Let's scroll to a staff member who's got some hours. Okay, so this staff member has got 16.27 hours left, and the time left for the end of the year is 272 days. You'll see at the very bottom though, this is record 1 of 2. So I move to the next record, you will see the following year's holiday, and you can then see what's been recorded in that year and how many days left on that particular holiday year. And in this version of Care Control, you can have as many holiday years as you want. Okay, in this system that we're using for test, we've got 2 holiday years. You may choose to only have 1. Or you may have 3, 4, 5 holiday years. It's really up to you in terms of how many that you want to try to maintain. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these other fields in here. So on the right hand side we have the bookings that they've made so far. Okay, so we can see the start and end date and the number of hours that have been booked, and for any of these bookings we can click on them and we can cancel them if we want to, because we're in administration mode here. Include cancelled means we can see a history of what has been previously cancelled for that particular staff member. And allowance calculation, that's where we can have a breakdown as to how we've managed to get to this figure of 171.27 hours. So in this example it's breaking down all the different contract changes and the number of hours that have accrued for that period, and all of that is then added up into our total figure of 171.27 hours. Okay, so you can provide that information to the staff member if there's any queries regarding how the allowance has been calculated. Holiday settings, now this is where it gets a bit more interesting, I suppose, in terms of holidays. The previous system you had settings which are across the organisation, but we've had a lot of customers come to us and say that they would like to have more flexibility with settings. So along with your company settings, which you still have, you can also change them by individual staff member if you wanted to. So these are the settings for Laura Atlas, and if I haven't changed them, they're going to come from what we'll call the defaults for the company. So the first setting that's shown here is one called booking calculation. Booking calculation is how does the system work out how many hours this person is going to be booking of their holiday. And there's 4 options for these settings. The default is per contracted hours. So what that means is if they were to book a period of time, say a week's holiday in August, the system would look at their contract and it would work out how many hours in that period of time that they are having, how many hours that would calculate for a week's holiday in August on their contract. If booking calculation was as planned work, that would actually look at the templated rota, the active templated rota, and it would try to work out how many hours they're going to be working for that week's holiday. And that is really how the current system works. That current system only works on the templated rota. So if you wanted to carry on working in that way, you would change that to as planned work. The third option is user defined. So user defined, it lets the users enter in a number that they want to book off. So if you're relaxed that your staff can decide how many hours of holiday they want to use for that week that they're booking off, then they can just enter that number in. We'll go over some of the safeguards and controls around this a bit later. And the fourth option is manager defined. So manager defined basically means the staff member just put a week. All they do is they put the dates in that they want off. Okay. The manager then defines how many hours that means to their organisation. The next option on holiday settings is allow auto booking. Now, when we're going to look into more detail, but holidays can be booked on mobile, Care Control Mobile. They can be booked on Care Control Pocket. Staff members could book them on their own phones using Care Control Pocket. Okay, so there's lots of flexibility in terms of staff having access to be able to book holidays. The option about auto booking, and we'll go into some of the rules around this a bit later, but if you say this to yes, that means if all the rules that you set up in your company, your organisation, are matched, then it will automatically book the holiday. If you say no, it means that every request must be reviewed by a manager. Okay. Now, to start with, you may want to say no because you want to make sure you've got a good handle on this. But when we go through the rules, you'll see there's lots of controls in place to be able to put some quite rigid controls over auto booking, which means actually you should feel comfortable about saying yes in terms of allowing staff to auto book. The next setting is holiday entitlement. The default is 5.6 weeks. That's the statutory minimum if we include bank holidays. But again, for your organisation, you might want to change that if that is the case. And again, you can change that at a company level or at a staff level. Accrued cap. Now, you can set what your accrual cap is. There is some school of thought on this that 210 hours is actually 37.5 hours a week of holiday allowance, and you can cap your system at that 210 hours. It really is up to you how your organisation wants to work, and you should take advice on this if you're unsure. But somebody say working 6 days a week on a 40 hours contract, and that goes over the 37.5 hours, there is a point where you could say that is more holiday than you statutory have to provide. Okay, so you just need to just check that. The default is yes, it will cap everything on 210 hours. However, if you wanted to allow staff to accrue more than 210 hours, then you can set that to no. The next setting you can change is the holiday year rule. Now, the default is per company settings. Okay, so that's a company-wide rule about what the holiday year is. However, you can change it if you want to start date or by birthday. So by start date, that means the date that they started with the organisation, it will be a rolling year from there. And by birth date, it's the same thing, but basically the birth date of the individual. We can obviously set that. That's obviously a staff member setting. Okay, so if we talk about how we book holidays, There's a number of ways you can do that. First of all, as administrators, you can book it through the staff screen by clicking on Make a Booking. If I go to a staff member in question, load up Joan James's record. We click Make a Booking. Similar screen to how it used to be on Care Control Windows. We have up here the year, and how many hours are available on each of those years. Here we can put a date span in. So if we were to say choose uh, 19th of August to the 31st of August, and then we hit next steps, the system will calculate how many hours of holiday that is. So in this case, 48.28 hours. However, it's also identified there are issues with this booking. Now, regardless of whether you've got auto booking turned on or off, okay, the system will still run through the checks that you've got set up in your system. So if I look at the issues, it's telling me that it's failed on 2 checks. Okay, check 2 has this holiday period already been allocated to other staff members, and you can see that it has, and that's breaking one of our rules. And check 6, have you tried to book holiday over reserve days? And we have bank holidays turned on the system, and you can see that the August bank holiday is included. So if you had auto booking turned on, this wouldn't be allowed to be auto booked. Okay, so in this example, if you want to try and book this, we're going to have to process the holiday. We'll go back to where we were previously. So we've put that booking in. We could also use to make bookings other systems as well. So for example, if we're using Care Control Mobile and we go to the staff menu and staff go to book a holiday, they will see a very similar form in terms of their booking experience as they used on Windows. So again, if we pick John James from the list, we were to change the dates to a similar set of dates in August. System will calculate the hours again. We can then run the check, and then again you can see that this is failing some fundamental rules, which again we can see exactly the same rules that have failed as we saw on the other system. We use slightly different dates here, so we've got the number of hours are different, but again it's the same principle in terms of being able to book holidays through these different devices. And similarly, if staff are using Care Control Pocket, we can go to the staff menu, and here you now have the new option of booking a holiday, and staff can use this. As an administrator, I have the option to pick multiple staff. They won't have that option obviously, but here we've got the same type of functionality in terms of being able to pick dates from the list, running the checks, looking at the issues, and then putting that information into the system. So exactly the same set of principles in terms of being able to book holiday either through Care Control Mobile or Care Control Pocket. What's important to understand is about these checks that are happening. So when we're trying to book holiday, it's coming up with these issues that are being raised, and that is to do with settings that are to do with the new roster system. So to access those settings, we go to time and attendance now, and we go to the roster system. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. We may have to do a quick update, so apologies for any small delay in when we do that. But before we get into the rosters, I want to talk to you about some of the settings that are involved in terms of holidays. So under the settings option at the top here, okay, we have a holiday settings option, and here is where we define the holiday settings for the company. So you'll see at the very top we have the default settings for all staff members, okay, and as any new staff members that are adding onto the system, and that includes what the contract population is, any accrual cap that's in there, what the holiday year settings are, etc., how many holiday years you're allowed, etc. Now if you wanted to change this retrospectively, you can change these settings, tick this box here, and then you can apply that to all staff records. Okay. You've also got in here the rules around booking holidays. So this is per contracted hours in this example, and allowing auto booking. Again, you can change that as the default for your organization. And then we have these auto booking rules. So the auto booking rules are these checks that are going on when anybody's trying to book holiday, either through mobile, through Pocket, or through Care Control Windows. And these are yours to control and to change. So there's 7 rules in total, and you can either turn the rules on or off, or you can modify what the rule parameters are. So the first rule is, have you got enough available leave for the holiday request? That's a fundamental, and that's turned on in this example. Has this holiday period already been allocated to staff members? This is where you can define how many staff members of a particular staff category are allowed off at the same time. You also have settings for the minimum holiday amount and the maximum holiday amount. These settings are in place to stop staff members just taking every Friday off, for example, on an auto booking basis, or booking extended period leave without you being aware of it. Again, these are rules. These aren't necessarily to stop staff being able to have holiday. It's about making sure that managers are involved in then reviewing the holiday request to authorize it or not. Rule number 5 is, have they provided the correct amount of notice? So again, this is where we're basically asking for the set number of days, and is there enough days being given for the request to come through. And again, default is 7, but you can have that for whatever you want in your organization. Have they tried to book over holiday reserve days? Now we try to make things a bit easier here. So you've got 2 tick boxes that you can tick. So if you want to include all bank holidays, and we'll keep maintaining the bank holidays over the next at least 3 or 4 years in advance. If you tick that box, okay, the system will automatically include bank holidays as a reserve day. If you tick the box underneath, it will include all dates in December as reserve dates. Okay, what that means is people just can't automatically book December holiday. Okay, you can still go through a manager review process, and you can still authorize it if you want to. The final option is you can add any specific reserve dates which are relevant to your organization. So for example, where I live, there is a local fair in October that we would normally put into the system as a reserve date just to stop everyone trying to book off that time, because it's going to be difficult then for us to deal with cover and get people into work. Okay, is there at least an X day gap between any of your holiday bookings? That's our last rule. And if that's set to yes, then the number of days you put in here will be applied. And that means that people can't then book sequential holidays, which are getting past any of these other rules. So for example, if somebody wanted a 4-week holiday and they thought, well, I'll put in 2 blocks of 2 weeks, then obviously this gap will stop that from automatically booking. And it's all these rules they're really about their guidance, really, and they're about you having those controls in place to feel comfortable that you've got visibility into what's going on with the holidays. Okay, so the final part of the holiday process are the requests. And you'll see on this system there are now 2 requests to deal with, and they're highlighted here under holiday requests. If I click on the holiday requests, the system will now load up a screen which for administrators can use then to assess the request, make changes to it, and to authorize or to refuse. So if we start at the top of the screen, you'll see it says outstanding requests, and these are the requests that haven't yet been dealt with. And you'll see that our Joan James's request that we put in earlier is listed. If we select the Joan James request, you will see information about that request. So about this request, we've got the start and end date. We've got the number of hours they're looking at booking. On the bottom left-hand corner, we've got what the analysis was for that request, how it has failed, if it has failed, and what the reasons were the fail was, so we can at least review that ourselves. On the right hand side, we have every absence that touches that request. So you can see here we've got people on holiday, but we've also got people on unpaid leave, rota changes. If you've got anyone on sickness, they'll be listed there. So sometimes when you're looking at assessing holiday, it's not just about other people on holiday. You might want to have a look about whether you've got any training events going on, whether you've got a lot of staff who are at the office, and that's where you might have to make some changes to the request. Above that, you've got some information about the staff member. You can have a look at their bookings. If you want to, you can send them a direct message, so that will go straight to that person. Down the bottom of the screen, you've got the refuse request option on the left. You've got the authorized request option on the right. You've got some other options about looking at their rota, looking at the calendar. You can even record what we're calling confidential notes. So here you may want to enter for example, I've spoken to Joan about changing the dates. Okay, so if there's a problem with that date, not right, you may have had a conversation with that person, and then you may decide to then just update the request, but not at this point authorize or refuse it. So you're going to keep the request going whilst you're trying to come to a compromise, possibly on what the right treatment is for this holiday. At some point though, you've got to either authorize it or refuse it. Now when you click on either of these options, you get a box up with a narrative that's automatically generated. And this example is telling you that it's saying to, sorry Joan James, your holiday request for this period of time could not be booked. Now at this point you can add additional narrative at the end of that statement, or you can delete that statement and put your own statement in, and that information will go back to Joan. And similarly, if you click on the authorized request, okay, so I need to just save the changes first of all. If I click on authorize the request, it then comes up with narratives. Good news, Joan James, your holiday request has been authorized. And again, you can put additional narrative in there as you want to. Once a request has been authorized, it will then be visible on the historical request screen. You can see here what is the treatment has been to the previous requests. Now, even if you've got auto booking turned on and a staff member books holiday and it automatically goes in, it will still create a request. It just will not require you to do anything with it. It will then appear on the historical requests page. Okay, so that's really important. This holiday request screen now includes all holiday activities. So you've got one place you can see what's been going on, whether it's coming auto booked or whether it's been requiring authorization by somebody else in your organization. We're just going to show you one other area of the staff module before we go into then looking at the new updated roster. Hopefully you've got a flavour as to some of the changes regarding staff roles, contracts, holidays, etc. So one other change we've made to the staff file is the staff leaver process. So before, I know it's quite frustrating for people, you couldn't mark a staff as a leaver until they were off the rota, and which meant there was always some delay in processing leavers. What you can do now is when you process a staff leaver, you can set their date 28 days in the future, okay, or immediately. So I could, for example, set this date to the 5th of July 2019, and what that will do is when I save that record, it will automatically now update the staff file to include that new leave date. You can see now the leave date is shown against the staff member. You can cancel that leave date if you want to. The holiday has been automatically adjusted based on that future leave date. So the contract end date has been entered in for that system, so you can see what that's going to affect the holiday. And this example, there's going to be quite a lot of holiday hours owed if your staff wanted to leave at this point because of the leave they've already taken so far. If that leave request is not valid or wants to be cancelled, you can just click on where it says cancel leaver, and that will then cancel that particular leaver and basically unwind all those changes that have taken place. Okay, so that's just an important new bit of functionality when it comes to managing levers. Okay, so we're going to go and look at the new roster system now. So hopefully everyone's still awake and is still going strong with regarding what we talked about so far. So we dipped into it very quickly earlier when we looked at the settings for the holidays. If we go back into the roster system, you'll see that it's shown on the time and attendance tab, and it says roster system as a way of a shortcut link into it. Okay, so the first thing you'll see is that if there is any issues with regarding your current live rotor. Now I appreciate we haven't even created a live rotor in terms of this webinar, but we're using real data in terms of to give you some idea of the information that you're going to be able to get back. So what I can see here is on this screen is a summary of the issues that I've got currently with my current live rotor. The coloration of the issues indicates how severe they are. So issues that are for today and tomorrow in red, and then we go down to orange, and then we go down to yellow, and then we go down to green. So we get this kind of this banding of issue color. We'll talk about issues in a minute about how you deal with them. Okay, but fundamentally, issues with the live rotor are around staff who are no longer going to be able to attend, and so there are cover issues. Okay, there is another issue which is around agency workers, which we'll talk about a bit later. But the first thing I want to show you is about templates. So the way it works within the new Care Control roster is you have one live rotor. Okay, so your live rotor is basically a version of the truth about what is happening in your organization at any one point in time. But in terms of populating that live rotor, you can do that based on templates. And templates are really important because if you don't have a template, the danger is you don't really know what your cost base is for your organization. And you need to have a handle on that. Otherwise, these costs can easily run away in terms of the number of staff that you've got and the hours they're working. Okay. In terms of the template options, if I click on where it says your template, you'll see some folders. Okay, and you can add additional folders and remove them. And the idea there is you could, over time, build up quite a few templates. And I think on the old system, I noticed it used to be called under the rotor models option, and you could almost get lost in the amount of rotor models that you had. So the idea is to try to help you keep things a bit tidy. You've got the ability to create folders where you can keep templates in. So to see your templates, you click on the folder and it will show you the templates on the right hand side. Now, really importantly, when we migrate on the 10th of July to this new system, we will take your existing rotor and we will create a template from it. And that template will be available under the active templates option, and it's going to be called migration something. Okay, it'll probably be called migration 10th of July, I think. So that will be your existing live rotor from the old system. Okay, so what we're trying to do is make it as seamless as possible. So when you go on this system, it will be as if you're using the old system, but obviously with this new interface that we're using today. The other thing that we'll do is we will process that template into your live rotor, just like your consolidated rotor is now. Okay, so in the old system, you've got this thing called the consolidated rotor, which has your current live rotor plus any absences, any adjustments. Okay, the language of this new system is the active template is your live rotor, and the where it says view live rotor here is your consolidated as it was in the other system. Hope that kind of makes sense. So if I look at the migration template and I can click on it and I click edit template, that will load up for me what the existing, from this system, what the existing live rota was. So it's the same as we had previously. It has no adjustments in it though. Okay, it has no absences, etc. It has no dates to it. Okay, it's based on a week, a rota week, and on this system we have multiple rota weeks. So here we are, rota week 1, rota week 2, rota week 3, etc. I think we've got 4 on this system. Again, you may have a 1, 2, 3, 4 week rota. Okay, and what's really important in a minute, we'll have a look at some of these settings, because the big change on this system is you can have the number of rota weeks that you want. So whereas before it was fixed at 4 weeks, you can have 1 week up to 12 weeks if you want to. Okay. The other thing you can do is you can start your rota week on any day you want. Okay, so in this system it starts on a Sunday. We have a lot of customers who start on Monday. We have one customer who wants to start on a Saturday, and if that's how you want to work, that's fine. So in terms of your template, this is where you are creating, if you like, what is your best endeavors in terms of the hours that you need to make sure you have on your rota. Now in this example we have, as you can see, lots of staff names. Okay, so in this template we're working on what's called a fixed rota basis, and I know quite a few of our customers try to work on fixed rotas so the staff know what they're working every week. However, you don't have to put staff names in here. Okay, if you want to, you can just put roles in. And this is a really big change as to what's happened with this new roster system. The previous one, we used to have to create made-up staff members, and if you remember, they used to be either called Carer 1, Carer 2, or A another 1, A another 2. Okay, to try to put these placeholders into the template, you don't have to do that anymore. Okay, if I wanted to, for example, to add an additional on my template on here on this Sunday, if I wanted to add an additional care shift, I would simply add the plus button up here. That would, on the right hand side, it would show me a list of roles that I could choose from. If I scroll down this, I will get staff members' names. Okay, but the starting point is roles, and I can say, okay, well, I don't know who's going to work here at the moment, but I know on a Sunday I need a care assistant. Okay, and I tick that green box. That's put the care assistant into the assignment. But the other important thing we've got to do is we must put a shift in. Okay, so every one of these cells here, okay, they have shifts, and I'll talk about some of the settings around shifts in a minute, but that is a fundamental. You've got to have a shift to every cell. So here we're saying we want a care assistant, but we're not saying when we want the care assistant. So here we're going to say we're going to need an additional care assistant 6 till 10. So 6 to 10 in the evening, we're going to need a care assistant. The third thing we can do on a cell, if we want to, is we can put an allocation against it. Now allocations are really powerful, and some of you use them, some of you don't. Okay, and what we're trying to do on this new version is to make it easier for you to use them. Okay, and we'll talk a bit more about allocations a bit later, but it does mean that then when staff members come and start their work, they will have a defined set of service users to look after, and associate with those service users are tasks that they need to make sure they get done. So in terms of accountability and visibility, allocations are really, really powerful. If you're working on a domiciliary care business, and again we're going to touch on that as well in this mega webinar, you can have an allocation to an individual service user. So for example here, when we look on allocation, we can select allocation group, and these are the allocation groups we set up on this system, or you could even allocate to an individual service user if you wanted to, okay, which is important for the domiciliary side of things. But in this example, in this care home we're working on at the moment, we're just going to process through a 6 to 10 and the role of care assistant. Okay, so if I scroll down on the screen, you will see now under care assistant we have a role of care assistant. Okay, so this is instead of having these placeholders, you can just add roles in, and if you want to, and I'll come out of this template, we can have a template which is just made up of roles. So if your organization, you don't have fixed rotas, you may have staff problems, or you may have you may run with lots of agency workers, etc. You can create a template, and we'll add a new one, just an example. So we'll call this our webinar test. and we're going to add a new template. This time what we're going to do is we're going to create it based on a set of rules that we're going to define, and we're just going to use roles. So here we're going to use not the first option, which is a completely blank one. We're not going to base it on an existing template, the migration one. We're going to use the third option, which is auto-populate, based on a set of rules that we're going to define. And here we're going to set our rules up. Now the rules are really easy. It's how many of these types of staff do you need on which days, okay? So let's start off with a cook. Let's say we need a cook on every day. We don't know who they're going to do at the moment, but we know we need a cook. And the shift, you pick what's called a shift template. We haven't really spoke about those at the moment, but that's where you're going to put a shortcut to what that shift is. And we've created one already called Cook's Day. So we're going to pick that from the list. And the final option is how many cooks do you want? How many cooks do you want in your organization on every day? So we'll pick one. The next option, you could be a nurse or senior carer, or in this example we're going to use the word care manager. And here we're going to have two care managers, but they're going to work different shifts. So the first care manager is going to work an 8 till 4 shift. Okay, it's an 8-hour shift, and we're going to need one of those every day. But also we're going to need another care manager, and they're going to work a 4 till 10 shift, and we're going to need one of those every day. Okay, and you can see where it says weekday here. If we wanted to, we could modify that to actually set it to a particular day. Then we're going to have some care assistants. So let's pick care assistants from the list. Let's say we're going to need an 8 to 6 every day, and we're going to need 4 of those. And then let's put some cleaning staff in. So domestics, we'll have an 8 to 2, and we'll have 2 of those. And let's say we have our maintenance man, and he's going to work, or maintenance lady, shall I say, and they're going to work 8 till 4, and we're going to have one of those. So here we've kind of created a very rough structure as to how we want our template to work. We click continue, we get a green tick here, and now we can click continue on here, and the system will go and create that template based on the number of weeks that we've got. Now in this setup here, we have a 4-week rolling template. So that means it's going to mirror that across those 4 weeks for us. And you can see immediately we've got, for week 1, we have our cook shifts, we have our 2 care manager shifts, we have all our care assistants, we have domestics and maintenance. And if I scroll to week 2, you'll see the same number of shifts, week 3 and week 4. Now on the right hand side, you'll see the number of hours we have over those 4-week period, and we can scroll down some of the other stats. We can have a look at it per week, per day, for the different roles. So lots of information there for you to look at. Now if we wanted to, we could just process this template into our live rota. And to do that, we simply go up to the top of the bar here, and we click on the process button, and we select process, and this is where we can then process the template into live. Now you remember on the old system, you used to have to process a template based on the next start of your rolling rota week. So normally if you started them on a Monday, you'd have to pick the next Monday. Okay, that's all gone now. Okay, you can process these whenever you want to. So some of the settings on here, and we'll just skip the auto process for the minute. We're going to go down to some of the process changes. So first of all, you can select new changes only. And what that will do is that will just add anything new on your template into your live rota. It won't remove anything from your live rota. Okay. The next option is date of this template only. If you wanted to, because you can create multiple templates, you could have a template for the cooks, a template for your nurses, a template for your cleaning staff, a template for your maintenance guy. Okay, you can have separate templates for these people. Now, if you were to have that configuration, then when you process that information in, you can select that only data for this template is going to be removed and modified. The final option is replace all data. That basically means that on the live rota, we're going to remove all the data and we're going to process in this new rota. Now that is an option that you're going to select sometimes when you're processing, if you like, a new template, that you want to make sure you have a clean starting point. And don't forget, it's only ever from the start date. So whatever the start date is on here is where it's going to be processed from. And this example, I'm going to just show you how this would look if we were to use this as a real test. So the start date is when do we want this information to be put into the system, and it will default to today's date, but you can choose any date in the future or in the past. Okay, so you've got that option on the system. So if we were to pick a date sometime in the future, so we can actually have a look and see how this is going to look. So we'll pick the 28th of July. 28th of July is a week 2 start date. Okay, so don't forget, on our template behind here, it's going to start from week 2, then week 3, week 4, week 1, week 2, 3, 4, and this example. And how much data do we want to process? So how much in advance do we want to process this information? So if we select 4 weeks, that means it's going to put 4 weeks worth of data in. You've got the option to go up to 12 weeks if you want to, in terms of data going into the live rotor system. Don't forget, as soon as it's in processing the live rotor, it's going to be visible to staff to see. So you want to try and keep some control over how much of the rotor they can look forward in terms of seeing information. The final option is to tick this box if you want to just force it to be processed now. The reason why that's there is because you could also set this up to be an auto process routine, and an auto process routine means that the system will automatically keep processing this template in, and that's really important if you have a template which you want to make sure that that is going to be the template going forward in time until it's changed. So if you click auto process to yes, it will just keep adding an additional day every day onto your live rotor. But here we're just going to tick this box here, we're going to save changes, and now it's going to remove all data after the 28th of July, and it's going to process in our template. Okay, so it's done it. We can't see it yet, we haven't looked at the live rotor, but it's done it. Now look, remember, we haven't used any staff names in this example. Okay, so what we should expect to see is all of these shifts, and they're going to need to be covered. The one thing I haven't, before we go off templates, I want to show you some of the other functionality on here. Okay, any of these cells you can touch, and then you can make changes to. Okay, so if, for example, you knew who was going to work that 8 to 6, if we wanted to give it to one of these care assistants here on our template, we just need to tick the box, process changes, and now that staff member will be assigned that particular shift. Anna Jenkins 8 to 6. If we want to make a tweak to the template, so actually 8 to 6 is not the right shift, we want to make a change to it, we can go onto the shift option, we can select another predefined shift if we want to, or we can go to what's called user defined, and here we can set our own template shift. So if we were to pick 8 to 6 from the list here, and we were to adjust that to say 5:30, and now we have an 8 to 5:30 shift, which again we can then process into the rotor, and it will make that adjustment. So now we've made the change. Again, on the template, you might have days where actually, okay, we defined that the maintenance man was going to work every day, but that's not realistic. So actually, he's on this. If we go back to say week 1, on week 1 he will have Tuesdays and Wednesdays off. Okay, so we've selected 2 cells, and this time, because we're not going to cover them with anything, we don't want them on our template, we're going to go up to the delete option, and we're going to delete those cells from week 1, and that's been deleted. If we know a name of the person who's going to be doing all of those shifts, so in this example we may only have one maintenance man, we can select the entire row. We go into the right hand side, we can select the maintenance man, C. Jenkins. We can then process that, and now for that week his name is going to be applied to all the shifts for maintenance. So you can see how we're already starting to change some of the template. If we wanted to, we could work on just this 1 week, and then we can go up to the copy option up here, and this will allow us then to copy the entire week 1, and we can say, well, let's replace everything in week 3. Okay, and if I process that through, okay, when we look at week 1, we look at week 2, which is we haven't really changed at the moment. We look at week 3, we've now got the same changes that we've already done for week 1. So again, we're just moving data around and we're making some changes to the different weeks. On the copy option, there's more things you can do. If you wanted to, you could match search criteria. So you could say, well, I only want to copy over certain shifts or certain assignments or certain allocations. And if you really want to, you can even copy them to different templates. So you can actually move information into different templates if you want to. So lots of functionality in terms of being able to create a template that you're happy with, that for you is valid in terms of what's going to be used to process into live. The final option you've got up here is to look at your template in different views. You can look at it from a staff member's view or a service user's view. And that's going to be important for our domiciliary care customers who want to be looking at the allocations from a service user perspective. Okay. So that's kind of an overview of templates. Now I'm going to show you how that affects the live rotor. So the live rotor, when I click on where it says view live rotor, if you remember, this is now, if you like, the old consolidated rotor. It's what we used to have as our fixed rotor plus any absences, changes, etc. And this can either be populated manually or, and we advise this, it's generated based on a template because you want to make sure you've got a handle on these hours and what's changed, etc. So when we're looking at a live rotor, it looks similar to the template, but there's some key changes. First of all, you have up the top here what's called the absence bar. Now the absence bar will show you for each day, and you'll notice now these are actual dates, not just week 1, week 2, for these are actual dates, who is absent on those days. And we have a little icon to try to indicate what that absence could be. So an ambulance is sickness, a tropical island is somebody's on holiday, and any of these ones you can click on and it will load up information as to why they're off, what the reason is, and how long that sickness is for. You can cancel an absence, you can update any changes to it, etc. If I click on an option which is a tropical island one, that will load up the holiday record for that individual. And here we can see the holiday they booked off, and if we wanted to cancel that, and those holidays we can do if that's changes that need to take place. So that's your absence bar along the top. A bit further down, you've got the ability to navigate forward in time or backwards in time, so we can see what's happening next week and then the following week. And every time you change weeks, it's loading the absence bar for that week and obviously the rota for that week as well. You'll notice at the top of all the live rotas, if there are any issues, they will be shown in the issues bar along the top. So you can see here we have some shifts that need to be covered for different roles. And just like on the template, if you select one of those, you can then deal with that issue. So for example, if I were to select the 10 to 4 tomorrow, okay, our smart bar on the right hand side will give us a list of all the available staff for that shift. Now you'll notice we have no available staff currently for that role. So that means all the other domestic staff are currently off sick or on holiday for that particular shift. So that would have to be assigned to a different person. To do the assignment, all we need to do is we need to hit the green tick, and that will then move them up to the assignment field, and then we can process that change, and that will remove them from the red area and it will put them back onto the live rotor. Now you might not know whether that person can do those shifts or not, so what you can also do is touch the little eye icon. That will then load up the staff record, the rotor record for that person. But because we've selected a shift, we also have an option now at the bottom which says message about the shift. If I select that option, we have two options. We have two predefined paragraphs on the system of can you or please confirm. If I click can you and select continue, you'll see now it's put Dawn's name on the right hand side. It's written a narrative for me. Dawn, can you please let me know if you can do the following shifts? It's put the date in, it's put the time of the shift in, and down the bottom, if you wanted to, you can tick the box and then you can send that straight away as an SMS to the staff member. Okay. The other option was please confirm. If I select please confirm, the message is slightly different. The message now says, Dawn, I can confirm that you are booked to do the following shift. So we've had a conversation maybe on the phone and we're just confirming, look, you're going to do the shift. And again, we can send it as a text if we want to, or we can send it just as a normal message. So if Dawn's going to be doing this domestic shift here, she's available on that day, we can hit process, and that information is now going to update on the live rotor, and she's now going to be doing that particular shift. And you'll notice that that has now disappeared from the 4th. And if I scroll down the page, you should see somewhere on here that Dawn Harris is now doing a 10 till 4. She's a care assistant, but she's doing a role as a domestic. You can see that there. Now the other adjustments that you might have to make, and again, you can, in terms of dealing with issues, you know, you have to select an issue and you can deal with it. If you want to select more than one issue, if you tick this box up the top here, you can now select more than one issue at a time. So we could say select that issue, and then we could select this issue here, and that will then allow us to deal with more than one issue at one point in time. Okay. The other thing that will happen quite commonly is you'll need to make an adjustment to an existing shift. So let's say that this lady, Laura Atlas, has rang up and said tomorrow she's going to be late into work. Okay, so we can select her shift, and here we get what's called the quick adjustment screen. Now the quick adjustment screen is all about making quick adjustments to that shift. We're not talking about replacing over a different staff member. We're just going to deal with that shift. Now we can easily just add 15 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes onto that shift. So let's say she's not going to come in till 9. We can then make that adjustment. If 15 minutes isn't a precise enough time, we can just overwrite that figure and put an exact figure in, so 9:10. And don't forget, this is all going to feed into payroll, so it's important that these are accurate in terms of the figures. But what's really important, if you're making a quick adjustment, you need to decide what you're going to do with the residual, because what you're doing is you're changing your template, if you like, and you're changing what you said you needed. So in this example, we need an 8 to 4, and now we're saying, well, actually, she's not going to come in until 9:10. What's going to happen between 8 and 9:10? Do we want to make sure that that is covered by somebody? So what we can do is we can mark on here, what do we want to do with the residual hours? Now, the residual hours, either we put them back on the system so that they are need to be covered, or we lose them. So we put show hours for cover, okay, and we process this change through. We now see we've got a care manager shift that we need to cover between 8 and 9:10, and we can see that Laura's shift has changed from 9:10 till 4. Okay, just as we expect. If you can't remember some of these changes, if you click on any of these cells, you can click what's called the cell audit, and that will talk you through what the cell was before and who's changed it, etc. So it's important to use that functionality over time if you want to try to remember those changes. The other thing you can do is you can record at this point in time very quickly whether somebody is going to be absent or sick. So for example, if you have somebody ring up and they're going to be absent, you can do one or two things. You can either click on the little bed icon here, and that will then load up the absence screen. And here you can select the staff member, set the date, number of days, etc. Or you can simply select the shift, click record staff absence, and now it's going to load up with that staff member automatically loaded. We can set the number of days, so if she's going to be off for 4 days, we can set the reason, And at this point in time, if we want to, we can put the cover in if we know who's going to do it. If we don't know who's going to do it, we can leave it blank, process that through, and now that person will now appear on our absence bar. So when we scroll down now, you'll see that D. Thomas is no longer working that shift. And we scroll down up here, we can see that D. Thomas is now been marked off as sick. We can click on that absence. Now, if we made a mistake, we can click cancel absence. We can confirm we want to cancel it. And also if we want to, we can unwind any rota entry changes. And this basically means if we really want to wind it back to how it was before, we can say yes, and it will now put her back into the rota, and that absence has been removed. Importantly, even if we've covered those shifts with other people, it's taken those names off of that and it's now put them back into how she was working before. Okay, so we've looked at, you'll see there's lots of these, there's a mixture of how the shifts are being displayed. We have this thing called where it says Cook's Days, we have 8 to 2, 2 to 10. Now those are what's called shift templates, and it's really important that you understand how you create those, because this will make sure your rota looks right and reads correct for the staff members who are using it. If I come back out of the live rota, and I go into the settings of the roster system, we have lots of different options on here, and it's worth us going through these so you understand how they're going to work. The first one is organizational type, and this is really important for our domiciliary care customers as well as our residential and nursing home customers. If you want a quick way of setting the system up so it's going to be right for you, pick one of these options, and you have residential nursing home or you have community-based domiciliary care supported living. Those are the two options currently you can choose. Pick one of those options and the system will be configured in the correct way. The next setting is core settings, and this is where for people who haven't used our rota system before, this is where you're going to set up how your rota behaves and functions. And the most important area is the area in pink here, where we define the number of rota weeks, what our rota start date is, and what is week 1. Okay, so the number of rota weeks can be from anything 1 to 12. Okay, so if you're on a 2-week rotation, you can select 2 from this point. Rota start date, what day of the week does your rota start? Okay, you can pick any day. And then really importantly, what is rota week 1? So in order for us to get a handle on to whether we're in week 1, week 2, week 3 or week 4 in this example, we need to know what our starting point is, and here you define what week 1 is. It doesn't matter how far in the past it is, as long as it's on a date, which means that today it really is rota week 2, which is in this example. Now you can change this after you've set up the system, but it's giving you a warning in red here, because changing this can have a big impact on any template you've created especially. So just bear that in mind in terms of modifying this after the event. You really want to make sure it's right, it's correct, and once you've set it up, I wouldn't advise you change it unless you really need to. Scroll down the other settings here. We have auto processing rules for the template, so what the frequency of processing is and how many days in advance that we process. We also have settings around what the default display is, and you saw earlier we've got 2 displays, either by service user or by staff. You can change that if you want to on this screen. We also have a new journey planning tool, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and stuff around where the journey planning starts from, whether it's at head office, whether it's at the home of the staff member, whether the first mile is rounded, so some of our clients always pay at least 1 mile, so even if it's a short distance, it's only treated as 1. And here we have those default settings that we talked about earlier, which again, you can change default messages. You can change the wording in here if you want to. The final option on the core settings is do you want to allow auto cover of shifts? Don't forget, staff members can use Pocket, they can use mobile to record to cover shifts, and if you don't want them to be able to do that, you need to set that to no. The next setting option is around staff roles. Okay, this is really important in terms of how you want to lay out your new live rotor. The live rotor now is based on roles rather than display groups, because display groups had a maximum number of 10 and we wanted to provide more functionality than that. Here you can define your roles and what order they come in. So here we have our cooks coming up top. Then we have the care manager and the care assistants, and then we have domestics and maintenance, etc. And really it's up to you as to what order you want your roles to be in. We've talked about holiday settings, so I'm not going to go over that again. Shift templates is the area that we really came to this to talk about. This is where you can define shortcut text as to what a shift is. And again, in your organization, you may have sort of like words like full day or half day or cook's day or cleaning. And again, you can basically define how you want to display a shift. So for example, if we had a shift template called maintenance, we may call the short name as maint. We may say that actually the maintenance default shift is an 8:30 start and it finishes at 3:30. And if you want to add any shift indicator, this is where we have a treatment for any payroll modifications to that shift we can do at this point. If we're happy with that, we can add that template in. And now we have that as a shortcut shift template that we can use a bit later. The final other settings, we've got filter sets. Now filter sets allow you to basically restrict access to different parts of the live rotor for different staff members. There's lots of functionality in here, and what I would advise you to do is look at our release note and go into that in more detail, because it's quite complex and I think it may extend this webinar to quite a detailed point, but it allows lots of functionality about restricting access into the live rotor. And then the final option is about security access. So the roster system has its own security module, and this is where you can define who can access it and what security level they've got. And there's different types of security role that they can use in terms of accessing. And in order to access the settings, you've got to be full access, which I'm using at the moment. If you're not full access, you can access this settings area. So when I go back into my live rotor now, you will see as part of the when I click on a particular cell, if I load the smart board, which is the full board that allows me to change the shift and the allocation, etc., you'll see now we have our maintenance shift. If I tick that box there, that's then going to shortcut this cell to the new maint cell description. Hopefully that makes sense in terms of making those changes. If you remembered earlier, I processed the template that we created into the live rotor, and I process it from I think it was the 20th of July going forward. So let's scroll forward to that point and let's see how that has affected the data in the live rotor. Must have been a bit further. I think it might have been week 2 actually, so it might have been from the 28th of July. So the next week, this is where we said, right, this is going to be our new template, and look at what it's done to our live rotor. Because our template had no staff members' names in it, it is processed, everything has gone into red, because all of those are roles that need to be covered and to be sorted out. And that's what will happen if you were to process a live rotor with just that template, which is fine. It just means you've got to deal with all of those cover issues. If I go to week 3, do you remember we had I think it was the maintenance man's name against some of the shifts. So if I scroll right to the very bottom, well, maybe we didn't put that one in when we processed it actually. Just going to keep looking at what other data has been processed in. Okay, that's interesting. I'll have a look at that, but I thought we updated the template, but maybe we didn't. Okay, so that is how the roster will be updated and represented with that information. a couple of more areas before we get to the end of the webinar. One is about dealing with these issues that are shown here. If you click on any of these issues, it will load up the day rotor, and this is quite a useful tool in terms of speed of access. So if I were to click on, for example, this issue tomorrow, which is that one we created earlier, the 8 till 9:10 issue, it will load up the day rotor where that issue is shown. So here we can see it at the top of the screen, and if we want to make some changes, that we can click on that cell. It will load up the smartboard. We can then select another member of staff who possibly could do it, or we can pick somebody else who's going to do it. So in this example, we may say, well, let's assign it to one of the managers, process that change through, and now we've updated it and we've dealt with it. And this is a really useful screen because it's showing you a day at a time. So again, you can just work one day at a time. So scroll to the next day, and you'll see the speed of response is a lot faster because we're not loading all of that information, or we can just see what is happening in terms of the cover that needs to be dealt with. We've got the same functionality. We can add shifts, we can delete shifts, we can record absences, we can deal with holidays, we can look at the information from a staff member perspective or a service user perspective. We can make adjustments to change shifts, so we can click on the cell and make a fast adjustment, so we can say they're not going to come in until 9 o'clock, and let's show those hours for cover, and that will now make that adjustment. So we've got an 8 till 9 to cover, we've got a 9 to 4 covered now for that staff member. You can see how these adjustments can be made very quickly within the day view. Now that is also available to access via this button here, okay, today's rota, and it's also available on the admin center where it says today's rota. So again, lots of ways of getting quickly to the today's rota in terms of making adjustments, and that's how I envisage you guys making changes to your rota quickly in terms of on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so the next area I want to talk about is agency workers. So with the system now, we have the ability for you to deal with agency workers in a specific way, and we have an option for agency workers here. But before we get to that, I just want to show you how you would deal with it in the live rotor or the today's rotor. So if we load up today's rotor and we were to navigate forward in time, so say we have here a shift, a 4 till 10 shift for a care manager, and just say we can't find any staff members to do it. If we scroll down this list here, you'll see there are a group of agency workers who we can select to be assigned to this shift. And if we were to pick agency 1 from the list, and we then assign that to that particular shift, you'll now notice that agency 1 is now assigned and we've dealt with that particular issue. When we go back to our issue screen though, you will see we've got a new type of issue. It's in purple and it says confirm agency. So what this means is we've assigned an agency shift on our live rotor, but what we haven't done then is confirm that we've rang the agency, we've booked it, and we know that an agency worker is going to be attending site. So to deal with that issue, we can just click on the purple text or the purple cell. That will load up the screen to then allow us to confirm the agency. Now, the first thing you're going to need to do is create an agency record. Now, the agency is the organization that you use to book agency through, and we may not have that information on our system. So if you don't, it's very simple on this screen. You can just click new, and it will allow you to put some care agency information in. And now when we go back, we'll see we have the care agency option that we can now choose from our list, and then we have the telephone number if we need to use it, and then we can put some comments in here. So for example, we could say I have rang the agency and a staff member will attend for the shift. Now the shift details are shown above, the date, the time. We can set the security settings for that particular staff member. So if we wanted to make it a senior carer, we could do, or if they're a non-carer, we can do. When we're happy with that, we then hit Save Changes. And Save Changes means that we confirm that we've rang the agency and we've booked that worker to come. And you'll notice the first thing it does is it provides you with a PIN number, 9684, and that's the PIN number you need to give to the agency. You can also print a guide, which you can also give to the agency worker, which includes the PIN number, which you can leave in an envelope, or you can give to your senior manager to say, look, give this document to the agency worker because they're going to need this. And that guide includes some very simple instructions as to how they can log on to Care Control, whether they're using Pocket or whether they're using mobile. So how does a staff member then use this agency worker use mobile? Well, if I were to say go back to the start of mobile, so this is on a tablet device if you're using those in your home, or if I were to go back to the start of Pocket, on both systems you'll see, because we've created this agency record, we've got an agency button. Okay, and that's what the staff member is going to use to sign in when they're an agency worker. So if we go back to our Care Control system, you'll see the PIN number that's been created is 9684. If I try and use that PIN number in the normal system, it's going to fail. So it says incorrect PIN, the PIN number's not correct. What they need to do as part of their instructions is they need to click on the agency button. They can now put their agency PIN number in, and the first time they use it, it will ask them to register their details. So we're just going to make some details up here. Put a mobile number in, and then we're going to hit continue. Yes, it's correct, and now they have registered first use of the system for that shift, and now they can go ahead and they can start to record care just like other staff members, and it'll be logged against that agency staff member ID. The next time they go to use the system, they still have to click the agency button. They still have to put their PIN number in, which was 9684. But this time, because they've already registered, it will then sign them straight into the system, and they can go about and start recording care information, etc. Now, the other information that you're going to be able to get in terms of from the system, if I click on where it says agency workers on here, this option will show me any issues to resolve. We haven't got any, we've dealt with those. It will show me the care agencies if we've got more than one, but also it will show me the agency usage that we've done. And if you go into each one of those, you can have a look at the record. It will tell you their details. So here the name that they put in, their contact number, when they signed in for the first time, how much time they've used it for, and when their last sign out was, what their total working time was. So again, this information is built into the system. Their timeout is 30 minutes after their shift ends. Okay, so at 10:30 on the 5th, they're no longer going to be able to access the system. If you wanted to deactivate them at any point in time, you can do by just clicking the deactivate button, and that will then stop the access in terms of in. If I click deactivate, and we go back and look at that record, we can see it's been deactivated. And now when I go back to my mobile system, you'll notice now the agency button is no longer there because we've got no agency staff that are currently working in the home to deal with those issues. So that's a new functionality regarding agency, which hopefully you will find useful. Now, there's lots of other bits of stuff which, again, is included in our release notes, and I'm conscious that we're already now in the last half an hour of what was originally going to be a 2-hour webinar. I will show you a couple more bits of functionality. One is around journey planning. So again, on any of the rotor screens, the live rotor screens, you can click on a particular cell, and if that person is visiting service users, you can click on where it says view journey planning, and the system will automatically calculate the mileage for each of the stops along the way. And unfortunately on this one we haven't got domiciliary data on here, but please, when you have a look at it yourselves, you'll be able to see the different mileages and the time, travel time, etc. That is all printable and also useful in terms of client timesheets, etc. Under the reporting section of the system, under domiciliary reports, you have a client timesheet report, and you also have a journey planning tool which allows you to create journey planning information across a period of time. So here we have the payroll periods, or you could have a custom date range, and it will go and look at all the routing for all the staff members over that period of time. So again, a very useful tool in terms of being able to collate that journey planning information. The other bit of functionality, which is again really relevant to domiciliary businesses, is our client absence tool. So the client absence tool allows you to record when a client is absent. This is a service user, the date, time, the span of that time. It will add notes to the care plan, but also it will message any affected staff. So if you've got staff members who are allocated to service users in the community, and you've been notified that that client is going to be absent, whether it's going away with their family or they're no longer needing help in that period of time, once you put this information in there, the staff will be notified, and obviously the rota will be updated with that information. Okay, I want to move on to one other area before we finish off the webinar, and that is a new tool called MemoryBox, which is included as part of Care Control Mobile. So within Care Control Mobile now, you have a new care recording area called MemoryBox. Now this will be expanded in our next update to include for family members to be able to access this functionality. Okay, so to start with, we're going to start with care homes, and we're going to move out to allow as part of their family and friends access. So under record care plan information, you have a new option called MemoryBox down here. Do you see that? If I click on MemoryBox, I can select a service user from the list. I can upload pictures, I can upload videos, I can put a URL into the system to a location. So for example, I could use a YouTube link, or I could use a Vimeo link to be able to link to it. We can put a message in there. So again, if that's from a family member, and then we can just put a URL in there for this example. Save that memory. Now that, as we've created that memory, that will now appear on our home status screen. Okay, and if you can imagine that family members could be doing this via their friends and family dashboard, okay, you will then see these memories appearing on your screen in order for you to deal with. When you click on one of these items, it will take you to the memory where we've got the narrative along the top. If it is a picture, the picture will be displayed here. If it's a video, the video will be displayed here. If it's an internet link, the internet link will be displayed here. You show that information to the service user, and then down the bottom here you can record a reaction with any comments. Once you've recorded that reaction, that will then appear on their care plan with the reaction that they last received. At any time you could go and re-click on that memory, and then you could record a different reaction if you wanted to. If you wanted to see a history of the reactions, just simply click on the emote icon and it will show you all the reactions that have happened over time, who showed it to them, etc. This information is also loaded up into their notes. It's available on the handover, etc. So it's really about us underlying this idea that we're including the support network into the system, and the idea is that if we can show and demonstrate in our care homes that we've got family members who are also and not necessarily family and friends as well, who are also feeding into trying to make it a positive experience, I think it's going to be stand us in good stead going forward. If there is a memory that comes through which is not positive in any way and they get a negative reaction, you can simply click on the memory, hide this memory, okay, and that information then will be hidden from view and it won't be shown, and it's actually put into a separate area of hidden items, and here you can basically keep it separate from the service user. So that's an important area, a new area of functionality which we're going to be expanding on. You can access memory box items on the left hand side of the care plan, and it's under memory box items down here. Okay, so something to consider. Like I said, we're going to be doing this another update very shortly for family members, and they're going to have a new dashboard that they're going to access. Okay, so again, they'll have opportunity just to add these in as they want to. We'll put some controls and some functionality in place so you guys can control the level of memories that are put in. We don't want you getting inundated with memories on your home status screen that you can't maintain or haven't got time to show the family, the service users. So, you know, we'll put some thinking into trying to put some controls in place for that. There's two other areas you need to be aware of as part of this release. One is we have a new installer that is specifically designed for the Office 365 environment. I know some of you have Office 365, and there is sometimes some clashes when Microsoft provide updates to the old installer. So if you do ever have those problems, please ring the support desk. Don't just put up with them. Okay, it's difficult for us to know how many of our clients have that problem out there. It's not something which is recorded in any way, because it's something which is very localized to that computer. But if you do have that problem, if you ring the support desk, we will update your system to use the new Office 365 installer. The final other bit of functionality which I think is worth noting, there's lots of changes in here, but obviously some of these ones are more about fixing bugs and issues. The final bit of functionality worth noting is under the system settings of the main system, and we have an area called under QR codes called a security setting under QR codes. Now that security setting will invalidate all of your QR codes. Okay, so one of the problems we've identified is if you are using QR codes and they've been out there for a long time, staff members could be breaking the rules by possibly taking a picture of those QR codes and then using those for scanning purposes, etc. So what we would advise you do is you use this new security setting to invalidate those codes every now and then by putting a new security setting in there. It could be a number, could be a phrase, could be anything you want. And then when you go back into the QR code area for the clients, QR code management, you have the ability to regenerate QR codes now for all service users in one go. So if you put the security setting in there, brilliant, regenerate all the codes, print them back out again, put them back on the walls, and now you've got a new set of codes which staff members will have to use in terms of any scanning that they're doing. So it's just something which we're moving forward regarding trying to sort of strengthen the security in that particular area. Okay, I think that is about it for this webinar. The release note will come out on Friday with some more information in. The really important thing is that on Wednesday we're going to migrate your existing router over to the new router system. Please try not to be in the middle of any router changes on that day, and please also feedback to us if you've got any concerns with the information that's displayed as part of the live roster system we have tested and tested and tested this migration, but we have lots of clients, we have lots of data out there, lots of variables. What's really important to understand is we're not changing your existing rota system. So that still sits in the background. So if we have any abnormalities, we can check and compare that with our existing, with the new rota that's been generated. Okay, so please keep feeding back to us, and we will endeavour to resolve any issues that come about as part of the changes that are taking place next Wednesday. Okay, well, thank you. If you're still listening, that's brilliant. And this video will be available to watch a bit later again, if you really want to. We will send out links to it as part of the release a bit later on. Thank you very much.